Happy 4th of July. This is the next play and a half for the Crump. So the Zettel is very short. It just says, not crooked, short hew, show disengage with it. Ringeck's gloss is this is when he wants to hew in from above from his right shoulder, do as if you would like to bind onto his sword with a crooked hew, and shorten and move through with the point under his sword and wind onto your right side, your crossguard over your head, and stab him in the face. So that's one thing we're going to look at today. And then in the Danzig and Lu, they add a little something. And so in the Danzig, he says, you also counter the guard of the ox with this technique. Perform like this. When you go to him on guard, if he stands against you and holds his sword with a cross guard on his left side in front of the head, throw your sword to your right shoulder and do as if you want to bind to his sword with a crooked hew. And hew short and disengage with it below his sword and shoot in the point to the other side, long under his sword to the neck, so he must parry. With it, you come to strikes and to other work with the sword. So I wanted to include that because the Ringeck doesn't include the also do it this way against ox, but it's very similar motion and it's very helpful. So essentially, what we've been doing is versus the overcut, we've been stepping out and crumping. So we've been attacking either the hands or the flat. This version, we're going to cut short, meaning we're going to end up under the sword. So rather than hit above to the flat or the hands, we're going to project out underneath. And so what we're looking at is we're going to end up in kind of a high parrying position, because we do want the energy to come down into the cross guard, especially if we want to be able to wind to our right and stab them in the face. If we don't do that, if we end up getting hit flat, it's going to drive through and it's not going to work, and we're more likely to get hit. So when I'm acting like I want to crump and I come in short on purpose, this is a time where instead of the lead edge going down into my left, I will pop this over and end up palm down so that the lead edge is catching this here. You can end up with the false edge, that's fine. You can definitely end up flat here. I just find that to be a less strong position, and one of the things that we say at the club is parry to structure, thrust to structure, cut to structure, meaning we always want to end up in a good position. So I like to end up projecting out. I'm still stepping out, I'm still kind of crossing my hands, but my lead edge is up, which hopefully drives their energy down into the cross piece, and that means that now that I'm under their sword, I can pop up into kind of a oxy position and drive into the thrust. So that's the first part, is we're here, and rather than the crump on top, we're going to kind of crump underneath, bring up our hands, and stab them in the chest. So when I'm doing this to the Pell, I'm again kind of a little bit out of range, and I pop out, wind, and thrust. Pop out, wind, and thrust. So it's not particularly complicated motion. The step and the crossed arms can be a little weird, and this is a little bit more timing specific. This can also, I think, if you mistime your crump, if the opponent is threatening you and you start to crump and realize that you've jumped the gun, turn up here and catch it and roll into there. So whether you are cutting short on purpose or on accident, I think you can end up in this position and use this technique. The other version, the versus ox. So the opponent is in that left ox position, that uncrossed ox, and we've been talking about striking to the hands, or you can strike to the blade and then use a winding to get control of it. This time though, we're again going to come up short, and this is a little bit more of a disengage. So I'm gonna project my cut and then fall short on purpose and disengage. And then the long edge is gonna turn against their sword. So for both of these, we are cutting short and ending up under the sword of our opponent rather than cutting over and ending up on top of the sword. So for this one, we can threaten the hands. It's very helpful if they see it coming and they even lift up a little bit, gives us a little bit more room. But either way, we're gonna disengage and then thrust. So the way I practice this on the Pell is so although I start with my initial step out, I like my body to drive the disengage, so it's just a little shuffle back. I don't want to do it just with my arms. So when I come here, I will let the body help me with the disengage. I can stay pretty collected under my sword. I don't want to do this because that breaks my structure, and if they get on top of me with pressure, I'm going to lose that. So bring your body with you and then thrust. pretty small motion, pretty simple techniques, but I think when you mix this in with the crump techniques that we saw last week, this gives us a lot of options from this starting position. And if you have an opponent that is aware of the crump and is maybe looking to counter it, this is some good ways to play with them and use those tendencies against them. So just remember, short, wind, thrust, or kind of a short to disengage against the ox and then thrust. And with both of these on the Pel, and then as the Danzig said, if they do parry that, you go into your other attacks from there. So go ahead and play with those. They're pretty short, but the motions are a little awkward, I think, until you drill them, and then they start to flow pretty naturally. I hope you have a good holiday, and I will see everybody next week.